Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yeah, live around the world on that thing called the internet at michaeldukeshow.com. And, of course, live around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome back to the Park in the Dark, the morning show, the hostess with the mostest. I don't know, something. It's one of those things. Anyway, it's Wednesday, hump day, middle of the week. We could see Firearms Friday from here. We're getting there. Now, normally on Wednesday, we're joined in hour two by State Senator Mike Shower for the Shower Hour of Power. But today, his arms are tired. He's out there flying somewhere. So he's going to be doing that. We're going to be joined in hour two by Kati Capozzi from the Alaska State Chamber of Commerce to talk about ballot measure number 1, which has not had a lot of press. It's the kind of the silent killer slipping under the door there. We're going to talk with Kati Capozzi about the Chamber's opposition to this bill. And what it means, not just the minimum wage hike, but all the other pieces as well, which is kind of appropriate since we talked a bit about it last week with Mike Shower anyway. But in hour one, we're going to talk with Frank Tomaszewski, who is the candidate for re-election in the Alaska State House. And we're going to get with that. Well, why don't we do it right now? I mean, we're here. We might as well, right? Got to keep him from eating all those virtual donuts in the green room. Man, people get greedy in there. Let's jump in right now. Frank Tomaszewski, our guest, as we join him this morning. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Well, I'm a little hungry this morning since I'm only eating virtual donuts. Michael, I'm disappointed that they, Amazon didn't bring a dozen donuts for me this morning.
I know, really, the blessing and the curse of virtual donuts is that they have 0 calories. That's the blessing, but they also are not that filling. Taste great, less filling. Anyway, so it is what it is. Frank, thanks for coming on board and joining us this morning. Let's get into it. I think, man, it's been a coon's age since you and I have sat down and chatted and talked about what's going on. So, in fact, I'm not even sure that we've talked since the end of the session. It's been a hot minute. So let's get back to this and see let's get a recap. First of all, who you are, where you are, what where you come from, and then let's talk a little bit about your experience in the last session, and let's move forward from there. So, first of all, a little bio drop here. Hit us with who you are, where you come from.
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you for having me. My name is Frank Tomaszewski. I have been in Alaska for 45 years. My dad worked on the pipeline, and he's one of the carpenters, and he worked in Alaska a few years before he brought the family up. So he loved it up here, and after working on the North Slope and in the Fairbanks area, he brought us to Fairbanks. I lived in Fox for many years. So I was 7 years old when I came to Alaska, and I went to Fox Elementary. I went to Weller Elementary. The first year it was opened, I went to Tanana for junior high, and I graduated from Lathrop High School, and then I went on to UAF. I'm an electrician by trade, so I was just counting the years back, and I think my first electrical job was 1994. So technically, I guess it's been 30 years. that's not what I'm doing now. Even though I still hold my electrical license, I have a electrical journeyman's license, and I have an unlimited commercial wireman's administrator's license. So that's basically a fancy way of saying I can start my own company and do electrical contracting, which I did for 17 years. I did that with my wife, Harmony, and we were just a small business. I think the most I had was about 7 or 8 employees at one time in the electrical field. Yeah, so I'm an electrician by trade. Right now, what I'm doing is for the past 11 years, I've been making birch syrup. So, leave it to YouTube to really complicate your life. I was watching YouTube and I found this guy, tapping birch trees in Russia. And I'm going, what in the world is this guy doing? And so I got very interested, and it turns out he was making birch syrup. And so I went right over to the window and I looked outside, and I live on Birch Hill, and I have birch trees. I can do that. So I ordered a bunch of taps. They came in the mail. I drilled my tree, and immediately it started dripping. So that's a miracle in itself, because there's only a certain small window of opportunity to tap your birch trees in Alaska. It's about a 2 to 3 week window in the springtime. And so just the fact that those trees were dripping, when my taps came in, was just a funny coincidence, I guess. But I've been doing that. I've made a lot of products over the years, different products, from syrups to jellies to vinegars, all using my birch syrup. Right now, I've kind of scaled it back, and I have 10 products in every Walmart and Fred Meyer's in the state currently, along with a lot of other different mom and pop shops around the state. It's more of a tourist thing, so I'm trying to grab a few of those tourist dollars and keep them here in the state, building economic prosperity for a lot of Alaskans. We try to, get as many of those tourist dollars as we can to influx into the state. So I've been married. So January will be my 30th year anniversary married to my wife. So it's been a long time. I'm like, wow, it's been 30 years. I still feel like I'm 30 years old, and here I've been married for 30 years. So
I was just going to say, welcome to the Freaks Club. I've been married for going to be coming up on 34 years. So wow. We're kind of an anomaly, you and I. That's for sure. And you're the king of syrup. That was something I did not know. I thought you were still working in the electrical field. So it's interesting to know. That's a lot of work. I mean, doing the syrup and things like that, that's a lot of work.
Well, I have 5 kids, Michael, and as you know, child labor laws do not apply to your own children. And so I have utilized.
Somebody's going to clip that out, Frank. I enslave my children. I mean, that's
of course.
Yeah.
And more power to them. I think everybody should work their children because they need that education. You cannot raise children to just sit on the couch and play video games. You have to make them work. They don't want to, but it's good. And there's so many things. My dad made me work. We used to go cut firewood. Right. Every weekend, my dad would work all week. And then the weekends we'd go get a load or 2 of firewood, both Saturday and Sunday, and for the summer. And my dad loved having a massive pile of firewood. And so we'd cut it, we'd split it, we'd stack it, and then we'd burn it all winter long. And, I despised having to go. I was like getting in the truck and know that we were going to be slodging through the woods, carrying this blackened firewood, and stacking it. I despised it. But I look back at those times and I think, man, those were good times. Life was good. Life wasn't, you didn't have all this stress and, things happening all around you. The world's coming apart and, wars and, and tribulations.
You weren't worried about the thing in Ukraine or this or that or the other thing. You're worried about, oh my gosh, I got to carry this log through the woods back to the truck. I mean, it was definitely simpler. I mean, we're almost of an age, and it's definitely a simpler time. That's 100% for sure. Frank, let's talk a little bit here about you ran for election, you got down to Juneau, you've been through a full turn here, and it's time. This last couple sessions have been kind of wild. Give us a bit of a breakdown here of your experience in this last session. I mean, all the oxygen in the room was sucked up by education. Defined benefits was another thing, which got some play, but not much in the House. And then, of course, the oil and gas issue. Give us a little bit of background here and your thoughts on what happened here in this last session.
Yeah, of course. And I think we did chat. I don't remember.
We did. It's all a blur at this point, Frank. Yeah. I mean, it's been weeks and weeks and weeks of candidates, and I can't remember who I talked to and who I didn't without looking at my spreadsheet. I've got a spreadsheet, but just give a quick synopsis.
Sure. So, well, as a freshman, I came down there into session, with not really, I mean, no experience, obviously, on how everything works and goes into all the different aspects of the politics involved in setting up the caucus and really organizing the House. It was all very new to me, which obviously because I'd never done it, but I think it was very positive experience. I mean, we were able to get a very slim majority, if you could call it a majority. We organized as a non-binding caucus, which I really wanted to organize that way. And I landed in the finance committee. Finance committee is my committee that I'm on, and also the legislative budget and audit committee. And so when you're on the finance committee, really, normally in the House, you're not on any other committee, because the finance committee is one that basically any appropriation that goes through the state has to go through the finance committee. So it's a very busy committee. And that's where the operating budget originates, in the House Finance Committee. And so that was a very good thing for Fairbanks, that we were able to get 3 seats on the finance committee. So we had Will Stapp and we had Mike Cronk, both on the finance committee with me. So previous session, it was Bart LeBon and Steve Thompson and one other that was in Fairbanks that I'm not thinking of who it was, but we had 3 finance seats, and we really wanted to bring those 3 finance seats back to Fairbanks, just because it's awful difficult to maneuver against, cities like Anchorage, which, have a lot more representatives in the city. And so everybody's kind of fighting for their fair share, so to speak. But it was good. I enjoyed my time on finance and legislative budget and audit. Legislative budget and audit is more of a committee that meets during the interim. So anytime there's something that we had a disaster or whatever, the governor needed more money, we would meet to approve some funding. We do a lot of the audits where, we get to see the initial audits. Like we have a meeting coming up, and we're going to be looking at the certified direct entry midwives. We're going to be looking at the audits for the state board registration of architects, engineers, land surveyors, the veterinaries, examiners, the board of nursing. There's a lot of different audits that we're looking, and these audits kind of, it's strange because these are the audits that were initiated in the previous session, right? When we go to do an audit now, the auditors say, you bet we can do that. It'll start in about 1.5 years or 2 years, because they're that backed up. And so you look at that and you go, well, I have a 2-year term, so I guess the next whatever makeup of the next legislature will be looking at those. So but it was a good, positive experience. There's definitely way more positives than negatives for me. I think we did well at holding back the tide of government spending and all of that. So it was a good, positive experience.
Frank Tomaszewski is our guest. We're coming up on the break, and so we'll continue on here, talk about his reelection campaign here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with Frank Tomaszewski right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Frank Tomaszewski. Frank, maybe we should streamline that auditing process a little bit, huh? I mean, if you have to wait a year, I mean, that to me, that sounds like baked in incompetence is what it sounds like. It sounds like, oh, yeah, we've made it so that now we don't have to start something for a year and a half. And so the whole makeup of the legislature could change by then. And who knows what's going to happen. And sure, we'll do that. Go ahead. I mean, you would think that especially, let me just say, occupational licensing is something that is a pet peeve of mine. And so when you see this, where you've got these boards and commissions that are overseeing stuff like this, and you're like, we think something's not quite right in there. And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll get to that in a year and a half and take a look at it and get back to you if you're still here. That just sounds like it's baked in ineptitude, right? And it's not even, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anybody, but it just seems like that's government working as intended.
Yeah, I think, well, everybody knows government works at the speed of molasses, right? So you're absolutely right. It would be good if we could get things a little faster. But, there's that trade-off, right? So do you want to double the size of the auditors, make more bureaucracy? You have to kind of weight that as, pros and cons as doing it both ways.
Well,
but
I think the bigger question,
definitely
I'm sorry, I knew there's a slight delay here and it's screwing us up. But I think the bigger question is, do we really need all of these boards? And that becomes the bigger question, not whether it should be audited, is that should we have to go to the government hat in hand to beg them to be able to, make birch syrup or weave hair or, polish nails, or, there's certain things that you're just like, why do we have to go to the king and say, please, sir, I would like to exercise my talents in this area only if you give me permission and I pay you lots of money, right? I mean, that's kind of what it's like. And I mean, I know, so look, sure, doctors being overseen, certain things being overseen, but I think people are smart enough to know, you walk into a place where there's some booger picker with a filthy office and, hey, you want to get a tattoo here? You want to get a tattoo here? Oh, I don't think I want you touching my skin with that thing. I mean, people can figure this out. Why does government have to be involved in every, aspect of it?
Oh, I don't think they do. You're absolutely right. There's some areas that we definitely need to look at. Like you said, doctors. Obviously you want to make sure they have a real medical license and are keeping up on current education and all of that. I'm an electrician, so I have electrical license. I have to do a certain number of CEUs, which are continuing education units, every year to renew my license. So, I think there definitely are some, but right. Like, I don't know what could go wrong with getting your nails done, or, I've actually talked to, one of my constituents was talking about the erroneous, fees that are for like a massage therapist. That they have to pay. And so, definitely looking into these fee structures and why some occupations are much more expensive than others. What is the real purpose? What are the boards doing? That's all something that we're looking at constantly.
Well, yeah, the barriers to entry, especially for small business, especially small sole entrepreneurs, sole proprietors and things like that. The barriers to entry get so big that you're like, I mean, you want to do hair weaves or cut hair. What, what's the deal? Oh, well, if you nick them while you're shaving them, they could get well, I could nick myself and get an infection. I mean, come on, people. This is not rocket surgery here. I mean, why do we have to? It's anyway. I mean, hell, the barbers used to be dentists at the same time. Remember, that was back in the day. Well, that was way before our time, but you know what I mean? That was what they used to do, is the barbers used to pull teeth as well. Not that they were professionals, and I'm not advocating for that, but I'm just saying we've gone a little too far in the other direction. All right. I'm a little random this morning, but let's get back to it. Frank Tomaszewski is our guest. I am saying that right. Let's get back to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do it.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're back. Frank Tomaszewski is our guest. He's running for re-election. Oh, man, Frank, what is the district? Every time they redistrict, it takes me 3 years to figure out, remember what the redistricting numbers are, and then they change them again 6 years later. What is what's your district again?
So my district is District 34 and basically encompasses a major section of Farmers Loop, Fox, out to Fort Knox, Chena Hot Springs, and it circles around North Pole and picks up Eielson, Salcha, Harding, and Eielson Farm Road. So it's a big district. Also Birch Hill, Steel Creek area, Gold Mine Trail. I think someone who may live in that area.
I may know a people or two that live. I may have spent much of a misspent youth in that area. So yeah, I definitely feel it.
I rode the bus. I rode the bus with your brother Joe. We're in the same class.
Oh, really? Yeah. I was just gonna say you're up there. You said you went to Weller, and I'm like, I went to Joy. That was before Joy was shut down. That was Weller wasn't even a twinkle in my eye when I was. So I'm a few days ahead of you here, but yeah, that was a good area to live in. I enjoyed that.
Oh, it was a great childhood out there in Fox. I mean, there was, I had my mini bike and we used to go just cruise the woods and, just play outside. We didn't have all this electronics and I think kids these days are, it's a disadvantage growing up. It's in some ways back then, but today.
That's always the fun part when they'd say, all right, just be home before dark. In June.
We'll see you in September.
Just be home before dark in June. And we'd always wander home when we got hungry. So that was how it is. Frank, let's talk about the re-election in your campaign here. What separates you from your opponent here? I mean, you've done this now. You've been in the battleground. You've gone to the session. You've seen how it works. And there's two different competing philosophies, I think, in the state right now. And it's not even necessarily along party lines. It's not even along Republican versus Democrat. It's more along the lines of, well, we were just talking about it with occupational licensing. Bigger, more intrusive government doing everything for us versus smaller, more limited government getting out of our way and letting us do. And that seems to be kind of the two philosophies that are competing here. So give us the give us the difference. What separates you from your opponent? What is your vision for Alaska as a legislator?
Well, my focus has been really on keeping the state of Alaska's government as small as possible, being fiscally responsible with our what resources we do have. Right, I'm all about efficiency as a business owner. I've been self-employed for over 22 years. So as a small business owner, I've had to balance my own checkbook, right? When the funds aren't there, you can't spend, and you can't just reach into someone else's pocket to take it. And so, that's been my mindset. And you had asked a lot of questions there, how the election's going, my philosophy. So I try to be more on the fiscal responsibility and keep as much of the money in the hands of private individuals. Our private sector is what grows our economy, not government. And I think that's a major difference. And honestly, with my opponents, I don't know a whole lot about her. I know what she has been talking about is basically the defined benefits, and really, so she's running to give herself a pay raise. And every time that government has tried to give me a raise, I've voted against it.
Right. Well, I mean, this is part of the problem. I mean, the whole idea of defined benefits, of course, if you go back and look at the history of it, you realize, we've been through 3 separate tiers of defined benefits. And now here we are in time number 4 with a defined contribution. And yet, even though we stopped, into those programs, we still have a $7 billion liability for the past one. And now they want to talk about giving a new one. I mean, defined benefits have been shown across the country to, the problem is, and we were just looking at a chart yesterday about inflation. Since 2020 to 2023, defined benefits, medical, I apologize, not defined benefits, but medical expenses have risen. Medical care has risen 128%. Hospital services have gone up 232% in the last 23 years alone. And so, and the biggest component of any defined benefits plan, of course, is the healthcare. That's what got us underwater in the first 3 tiers of our defined benefits plan. So the idea that somehow this is going to save us money, this is going to be bigger, this is going to be better, and it's not going to cost us anything, even though the Reason Foundation came in and said that it's going to cost us, $10 billion over 14 years by their estimation. I mean, we just keep adding to it. And as you said, the private sector is what drives an economy overall. Now, Alaska is unique, and this is something that I don't know if you've talked to your neighbor out there, Rob Myers, about a lot, but he's pointed out and come to the conclusion that, Alaska is unique because we have this divorcing of the public and the private economy. We're the only state where the government doesn't get its revenue from the people directly. Every other state, there's some kind of sales tax or income tax or use tax or something that's gone on out there that's where the government derives its money from. They have some few investments and some things that come in, but Alaska, it's totally disconnected from that because they get their money from the oil companies at about 25 or 30%, and then the rest of it from the permanent fund itself. And so they don't really care what happens in the economy. And I'm not saying they as in you, I'm just saying overall as a corporate body, it seems like they don't really care what happens to the private economy as long as the public economy is taken care of, those employees are taken care of, and that money keeps flowing from the permanent fund. They're okay. And that's part of our problem. Would you agree?
I agree completely. And if the state government ever gets to the point where it is completely separated from the people, they won't listen to a thing you and I have to say, or the constituents have to say. And I would disagree a little bit because, as taking part of the permanent fund, I think you are deriving your revenue from the people. It is a tax. That's people have relied on that for, the past 30, 40, how many years? It's been 40, almost 40 years now.
Yeah, 45 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's at one point in time, it would have been so taboo to even attempt to steal part of that permanent fund dividend. But that's what the state government's been doing. They've been siphoning it right out of people's pockets. And so there is somewhat of a connection there. I would have to.
Yeah, there is a connection, and we talk about that a lot on the show. And it's disproportionate because
totally.
Because it's basically proportional to income. You're talking about people who are in the lowest income brackets having to pay 20% of their annual income to state government, while people who work in the legislature, who are the top 20% overall, are only affected by maybe 4 to 1% of their income, depending on where they're at.
Yeah, and that's their coffee fund. Right?
Exactly. I said it the other day. It's like the difference between buying a car and buying a burger. For some people, it's like that. It's like buying a burger no big deal, and that's the frustrating part. And that's, it just seems like a lot of people in the legislature don't get that, Frank. You apparently get it because you bring it up. But, Alaskans, That's their money. That's not government money. That was their share of the oil royalties. That was how it was envisioned. Because as Hammond saw it in the early 60s or late 60s, when that first royalty check came in, and it was almost $1 billion. The state budget at that point was like $162 million for the whole year, for the whole state. And they got nearly $1 billion, and they burned through it like drunken sailors on shore leave. I mean, it was like, you know, and that's when Hammond said, we've got to do something to connect it to the people. And yet here we are, 8 years later, after Walker's little foible there, and we're still having that money taken, and they act like that's the only way to do it, because we can't live within our means.
Well, you know, there's a good analogy on that also, Michael. It's like, have you ever taken your kids to the state fair, and you know, you say you give your kid $50 and say, go for it, go have fun. You know, they might look at that $50 and say, woohoo, you know, they turn out there and they spend that just as fast as they can, right? And 10 minutes later, they come back and they say, I'm out of money. And you give them $2 the next time and you say, okay, go have fun. Well, they're going to think a little harder on where they're going to spend that $2, right? It's going to take a little bit of, they're going to take a little more thought and have a little more consideration on what they're doing. But you're absolutely right. You know, the more you give state government, the more they're going to spend, and the more that's available to them, the more they will find projects or this or that and the other thing to spend it on. And when you look at defined benefits and what that's going to do to our economy, you think you have a small permanent fund now, you know, that dividend will disappear very quickly. And then you're going to be looking at some sort of a broad tax.
Right. Well, I mean, look, Frank, you've been in the legislature. You've seen the governor's 10-year forecast, I'm assuming. You've seen that. You're on the finance committee. You've seen the governor's 10-year forecast.
We're in the red.
Every year, starting next year, moving forward, it's $600, it's $700, it's $800 million in the red every year moving forward. Now, they could consume, by the time you hit where it's at the $1.2 billion deficit mark, you could consume all of the permanent fund. And there's still a deficit, right? And that's not accounting for the fact that government is going to automatically increase just based on contractual obligations and escalators by $150 million a year every year. That means in 10 years, your budget's going to be at least $1.5 billion larger in 10 years. So the PFD, if we don't stop this, if we don't fix it, the PFD is gone, right?
That's the forecast.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, the PFD is gone. And then the next thing you'll hear is, well, free rides die hard. And you Alaskans, you need to pay your fair share because, I mean, every other state in the nation pays taxes. So we should too now. That'll be the next. I mean, this is what kills me about all these folks and Republicans. I'm going to pick on Republicans for a minute because they're the ones that say, well, no taxes whatsoever. You're already being taxed.
And like I said, it's a regressive tax.
It's
right
super
now.
regressive. It's more regressive than any sales tax or anything else. Ben Carpenter proposed a sales tax as part of a larger plan, not a standalone, as part of a larger plan. And even Brad Keithley, who's been talking about a flat tax with me for 10 years, has said Ben Carpenter's tax is actually even better than a flat tax because it generates more money with less taken out of each individual's pocket. That makes more sense, especially when you combine it with cuts, more resource development, a rejiggering of the oil taxes, all the things, you know, constitutionalizing the PFD, all the things that the Fiscal Policy Working Group talked about. That's a solution. If we don't deal with it now, Frank, in 2, 3, 5 years, this is going to be a moot point.
Yeah, we need to absolutely deal with it now. And it's really frustrating that you cannot get the traction on a real fiscal plan. You know, you got like you said, you have two competing sides, and one wants to just generate more revenue, right? Because they need more revenue to buy more widgets, and give themselves pay raises and that sort of thing.
Right. It's always about more. That's what it's always about. It's always about Right? That's it. We need more MOAR, more money. That's what it's always about.
And that's why I've always supported our local tax cap, that we place on the borough every 2 years. We vote that thing in, and we need a similar spending cap like James Kaufman, and I think Will Stapp had the bill for the spending cap, which we couldn't get traction on. They don't want to reduce the spending ability of state government. But I need that to happen before there's any, hey, let's have another tax.
Well, but
right?
even Will Stapp's tax cap, I mean, they snuck in that they put the permanent fund under the tax cap at the last minute on that last. There was some behind the scenes stuff there that was like, okay, guys, come on, let's get serious about this and let's not just play politics with it, which is what was happening. But all right, this next segment, Frank, I'm going to give you the floor, and I want you to talk about your vision for what, where the state goes, what you would be doing, what your vision is, and where you want to go if you're reelected. What are we going to be doing? Frank Tomaszewski is our guest. We're going to continue the Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Frank Tomaszewski is our guest. Frank, we're going to talk about, and I'm just giving you a little background when I was talking about the healthcare costs, because we're going to talk about this more with people here in the future. You got to look at this chart, and I don't know if you can see this chart, but this is called the chart of the century, and this is put out by an economist. I've forgotten his name right off the top of my head, with the American Enterprise Institute. He's been tracking this since 2020, and you look at this. This is just overall inflation on basic consumer goods and services and consumables. And you look at this and you tie it to what's going on in the state government. You look at what's going on with the permanent fund. And when you realize that hospital services, 232%, college and tuition's up 183, medical care 128, child care's up 127. Now the average hourly wage has gone up 109%, and that's great. But when you have things that are doubling, going up 1.5 to 2 times, what the average hourly wage is increasing, this is going to be a continuing problem moving forward. Would you agree?
I agree completely. And when you have a government that continues to print money, this is what's going to happen. I mean, if you inject more money into the money supply, you have more dollars chasing fewer goods. Prices of everything are going to go up.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. Again, but we've had legislators who basically have said to other legislators, we've had it quoted on the show here saying, well, but the government economy is the economy, right? I mean, that's what they've said inside the halls of power. As you know, the government economy is they have worshipped at the idol of the government is the answer to everything for so long that as long as the government's taken care of, everything else will fall into place. Right.
I don't want the government to take care of me. That's for sure. And if people are waiting for that to happen, you're going to be waiting a long time. I never want to be beholden to the government to take care, cradle to grave. That's what they work on. And it's really unfortunate. It's like food security and all these other things that are happening. You better have a few beans in the pantry, and some rice and some beans in the pantry, because times could be tough coming. I mean, just look at the strike that we had with these longshoremen. We're at the very end of a very fragile transportation system. And when the ships stop coming and the trucks get stopped, our grocery shelves will clear out real fast. And so have a few extra cans, take care of, you got to take care of yourself.
We saw that during the pandemic, right? I mean, the fragility of the supply chain was exposed during the pandemic. I mean, they had 30, 40, 50, 80, 100 ships offshore at Long Beach, and they couldn't get them unloaded fast enough. And our shelves got real bare, right? I mean, we've always talked about on this program the 3 B's, beans, bullions, and bullets. That's where the 3 things you should probably be putting together to make sure that you got to take care of yourself. And it just seems like the people in the legislature, for the most part, not all of them, but corporately together, they're just like, as long as the state government is whole, we'll be fine. But of course, they never talk about the amount of federal money that's pouring into the state. What happens when when Uncle Sugar finally understands that he can't borrow any more money? He can't print any more money. What happens then to the state? Are we prepared for that? If we lost all the federal funding, or hell, if we lost half the federal funding next year, what would happen in this state? We'd have to face some hard realities.
Absolutely, we would. It would be tough times. When our reliance on government, federal government or state government, whichever one you're relying on, you don't want to do that. We don't want that. We don't want that in our lives. We want government to stay out of our lives. Like you said, just like with the boards and commissions, get out of the way, let people do their own thing. As long as they're not hurting other people, we really need to be incentivizing innovation and not trying to stifle it through more government regulations.
Right. I mean, the theme of the show around here is libertarians. We're plotting to take over the world to leave you alone. That's what we want to do, right? I mean, we just want to leave you absolutely alone. And that's again part of the problem, and that's what we're fighting against. I mean, your opponent pushing very hard on defined benefits. Again, kind of a cradle to grave mentality of making sure that everybody's taken care of, never thinking about the long-term costs of it. And what does it mean, especially if you try and compare it to people in the private sector who are struggling just to get by. It's a conundrum, but here's where we're at right now as far as it goes.
What
right.
Someone should be promoting is financial literacy, right? My opponent actually pulled money out of her retirement account last year. If you look at the APOC reports, it's always on between this number and that number. So somewhere between 20 and 50,000, she pulled out of her retirement account. I don't know what for, but that's just bad idea. When you get your money into a retirement account, it's really bad idea to pull that out. Take those tax hits.
Hold on a second. Here we go.
The Michael Dukes Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, we're continuing on here. Frank Tomaszewski is our guest, candidate for re-election in District 34. Frank, we're talking about, you said what we really need is for everybody to get a lesson in fiscal literacy. I would just say we need a lesson in arithmetic. I mean, fiscal literacy sounds fancy. How about just some education in basic arithmetic? You can't take in you can't expend more than you take in at either the federal or the state level and expect that it will continue indefinitely. I mean, you're a business owner. If you've got a cash reserves account, you can't spend more than you take in for very many years before you've drained all your cash reserve account, right? And then there's nothing left. And then now you're hurting even worse because you didn't fix the spending problem and you have nothing to fall back on if something comes around. I mean, that's the problem here.
Well, if you leverage yourself to your eyeballs on credit cards and loans and get yourself into financial difficulty, it is very difficult to pull out of that. When a good portion of your income is going to finance charges, right? You're making the credit card companies rich. You're making the banks rich, and living within your means is something that everyone needs to exercise. It's something that should be ingrained in our children. They should be teaching that financial literacy in school. And like you said, mathematics. Well, if you look at mathematics, with reading and mathematics in the state of Alaska, we're at the very bottom percentile of literacy in the nation. I don't know what it is now, 47th and 48th out of 50 states for math and reading, and that's unacceptable.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I want to give you a chance here. We got about 8 minutes or so. So, what is your vision for the future? I wave my magic wand. Frank goes back to the House. You're the rep for District 34 again for another couple of years. What is your mission? What is your vision? What is your plan of attack here? What are you looking at as you go back? What would you like to accomplish and look back on and say, this is what we did while I was here?
Well, one of the things that I've been pushing for from the beginning is this rail extension to Canada. Let's get our rail to the border. I've been working with Senator Sullivan's office, trying to find some way to maybe take those baby steps. We've got the Northern Rail extension headed down to the Greeley area, and just start that process. If we had a railroad that went through Canada and to the States, our cost of goods would definitely drop. It would be great economic driver for our state, making the cost of everything a lot cheaper. Of course, people have been talking about this gas line ever since the oil pipeline ended. We were going to get another pipeline, this gas line. It really is disheartening to me to think that we would be importing gas. Even if it's, there's the thought that, hey, it could be cheaper. Shouldn't we be doing it if it's cheaper to import it? But in my mind, I don't want to send our money from our state out of state. I would rather see the money come into our states.
Right. Well, I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm sorry, but this is just as, look, we have this emotional reaction to any time, especially when we're talking about Alaska resources, oil, gas, things like that. And our emotional reaction is, well, we have 17 trillion cubic feet of natural gas on the North Slope. We've got why don't we do that? Well, it's because of economics, right? I mean, if we have to pay twice what we would pay to import it, or maybe we have to subsidize it, somebody's paying for it. We're paying for it. It's just coming out of our PFD now, right? Maybe our heating bill isn't going up, but we're seeing, I understand the emotional pull to say we should have Alaska resources being used in Alaska. But at the same time, this is the same reason why we don't grow all our vegetables in Palmer anymore, because it was cheaper to bring it up from the lower 48, substantially cheaper, and it allowed more people to stay in the state and be able to afford to do it. So while I agree with you on an emotional level, again, back to the arithmetic, if it is still cheaper to import the gas, even if it's just in the short term until the economics work out, doesn't that make more sense? Or should we be going back and saying, we'll subsidize it? We'll take, well, it's not a subsidy, it's a credit. Yeah, but that's money that we were expecting to take in, and now we don't. And so it has to be offset by something, which means it's coming from your PFD, right? So there's a balance there.
Well, and we just talked about a very fragile transportation system and how we're rely on the lower 48. So do you want to be in that position where, if it hits the fan, do we want to be in the position where we're not growing our own vegetables, even though they may have been a little bit more expensive to grow our vegetables here in Alaska? Do we want to rely on ships coming in to bring our gas to heat our homes? Or do we want that security, that knowing that we have our own supplies, right? We are able to take care of ourselves. And I would like to be in that position. And I don't think it's going to cost double, right? That's
no.
There's been studies out there and reports out, and they'll go in both directions, right? It'll be cheaper to get it from the North Slope, or it'll be cheaper to import it. So there's that discussion that continues to happen. But I would think that we could be smart enough to figure out a way to make it economically feasible. We need those export contracts for other countries. And if we get the export contracts for things like natural gas, it'll absolutely be, I think, a good thing for our state.
No, I mean, look, there could be things, but again, the free market is what should decide that. I mean, again, people a long time ago decided it was cheaper to import. Is it smart to import all your food? Maybe not in the case of something happening, a disaster, or the what if. So is there a will to change that? No, not right now. That's part of what and then there's a correction. Something happens, people go, oh, maybe we should be cooking more of our own food here in the state of Alaska instead of importing it. But that's just, again, that's part of free market economics. And that's what happens. And we're a more global economy now. So we're seeing more of that. You're right. I'd like to see Alaska gas exported. You know what? You want to fix, instead of spending however many $1 million per mile for a railroad, how about we just eliminate the Jones Act? How about we just do that and allow stuff to be shipped up here in a cheaper I mean, there's so many different things that could happen, so many different levers that could be pulled. It all comes back to in a lot of ways, it all comes back to government being part of the problem.
Absolutely. And just trying to get something like the Jones Act out of the way, I mean, that we're still relying on the federal government to do that for us. So I think any way that we can, take our own destiny in our hands and, produce things for ourselves, grow things for ourselves, have our resources. It is a moneymaker. We have more resources in the state of Alaska. And one of the things we really need to be fighting about and really need to be vocal about is this federal overreach, locking up our lands and telling us no at every single step of the way. We have to go to court. We have to fight for years to get a road passed, to get a bush cut down, whatever it is. It's a ridiculous amount of federal overreach. And I am hoping and praying for a new administration in the White House so that we don't have this kind of problems moving in the future. Because if we get the same old, we're going to have problems in the state of Alaska.
Right. Less than 60 seconds here. Frank, final thoughts here as we let you go. Where do folks find out about you? Your elevator pitch, go.
Thank you, Michael, for having me on. Frankforfairbanks.com is my website. You can email me at frankforfairbanks@gmail.com. And that's the number 4, Frank for Fairbanks. And people say this all the time. We're at a crossroads, right? This is the most important election ever. But, really it is, especially on a federal level. If, we really need to get our government headed back in the right direction. And,
right.
There's such a push for
Frank,
this.
Frank, I'm up against it. I apologize. Frank for Fairbanks.com, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hold the line. Back with more after this. Sorry, Frank. It's a hard stop at the top of the hour. So when I said, I'll give you here. I know Katie's hanging out in the wings here, drinking all my coffee and eating my virtual donuts. We'll let her save me a sprinkled one, Katie. Don't eat all the sprinkles. Those are my favorite. Frank, I will give you your final bite at the apple. So we reset, and you got about 2 minutes here. So your final thoughts here on this, on everything that we talked about. If there was something you wanted to hit that I didn't hit on, now's the time to do it. You got about 2 minutes here, so take your time.
Yeah. One thing that we didn't talk about is the initiatives on the ballot. Ballot Initiative 1, Ballot Initiative 2, obviously the minimum wage and ranked choice voting. And I'm voting no, and I'm voting yes. So no on 1, vote no, vote yes. Tell the Democrats to give it a rest. Okay. This is number 1 with the minimum wage increase is not just about minimum wage. It's a lot of problems for small businesses, and
right.
It's not going to be good for our economy. It's going to shut a lot of people down. Get out and vote. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, drag them to the polls and get them to vote. Early voting starts October 21st, right? There is no reason that you can't get in and just take care of it. Take care of it early, get it done, get it off your plate. And then when the barrage of radio commercials and television commercials, you don't even have to listen to them. You just can tune all that stuff out. You've got your vote in.
Yep.
Get down there and let's make this the biggest turnout ever. Let's
Yep.
impress ourselves, impress the nation. Get out there and vote, because it is your voice. Let me tell you, if you do not vote, you don't really. I mean, if you're going to complain,
Shut your
you're
pie
not
hole.
entitled to vote, to complain if you're not out there voting. Please get out there and vote. Every vote counts. I don't care what people say. Well, some people say, well, you know, the election will be called before Alaska's polls close. It doesn't matter. They may need, at some point, they may need our three little electoral college votes. And somewhere in the future, they may need it. We've seen elections decided by one vote before. We've seen them by a coin flip in the legislature. So please get out there and vote, and bring your neighbors, bring your friends, and really look at the issues.
Yeah, don't think that your vote doesn't count. And that's part of the problem. I think that's also kind of working as intended, that politics has become so divisive on purpose because it turns people off and then they just stop voting. And I think that's where the big danger is. We get so focused on the national issues, we forget that it's the local stuff that affects us on a day-to-day basis. And that's where we should be putting our focus and things like that. So I'm 100% with you on that. And yes, the same thing, the ballot measure 1, the poison pill of ballot measure 1, the sugar that makes the bad medicine go down is the minimum wage component. It's the other stuff that's going to get you in the end. And so we're going to talk about that with Kati Capozzi here in just a minute. But anyway, Frank, good luck, my friend. I hope you succeed. And we look forward to talking to you again here in the future. Thanks for coming on board.
Thank you, Michael.
Appreciate you being part of it. All right, Frank Tomaszewski, District 34. I see that Kati, as I said, she's back to what you got, a little bit of powdered sugar right there from that virtual donut there. Kati, just pull that up. Let's check Kati's audio, make sure everything's all good to go here. Let's bring her back on board. Hello, Kati. How are you?
Hey, how you doing? Can you hear me all right?
Good. I can hear you just fine. All right,
Awesome.
good. We're all ready to go. And we're about to jump back into it here. We're about a minute and a half out here before we rejoin the radio. So we'll start that. And then between now and then, it's just you, me, and 70 of our closest friends on the internet. You want to say anything salacious before we jump back to the thing there? No.
I mean, nothing salacious, but really excited to this conversation. Happy to have the opportunity to talk on this. It's been a sleeper issue.
It has. I mean, isn't it crazy? I mean, ranked choice voting kind of sucked up all the oxygen on the ballot measure side of things. And then, of course, everything else that's going on. And quite honestly, there was very little that I could find about ballot measure number 1 up until a few weeks ago. And then it was just like, ooh. You start looking into it more and more, and you realize it's a real problem. So,
it's
all
a
right.
real problem.
Yep. Well, we'll pull this in here and get started on this here in just a moment. Kati Capozzi, our guest, protect our small businesses. It's a Vote No on 1 campaign. We're going to talk about that. Let me go back to the chat room here to see what else you guys been talking about. Next job, get Wasilla to change its voting date to November. Remember, you're a vote borough, state, national. Be sure to watch those ballot measure numbers and do not get confused. Yeah, I mean, I think every municipality, quite honestly, I think it should just be aligned. I mean, why do you have, part of the state, Fairbanks and down on the peninsula, they vote in October. Wasilla, the Mat-Su votes in November. Anchorage votes in April of all time. I mean, you have a municipal election I'm not paying attention to things in April. And again, I think that's all working as intended to just kind of keep people disconnected from it. Put it all on one day. Yes, you may have 5 pages of ballots by the time you get there, but by God, just get there in one day. Make it all happen. But you've seen how bad people have pushed back on that, right? You've seen it. I mean, the Fairbanks North Star Borough just attempted this here not too long ago, and they're like, oh, we couldn't do that. Why? Why hold more elections at the cost of, there's a cost, right? Same machines, same ballots, same everything else. Why are we doing this over and over and over again? Well, because it's working as intended. Anyway, let's see what else. Early voting starts on the 21st. I'm going to be early voting this year for sure for myself. Brian says we were just talking about the Jones Act. Brian's got something to say on the Jones Act there. We'll have to come back to that because we're out of time. All right, well, let's just get to it. It's time. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do this thing. Back with more right after this.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on that thing we call the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to my social media sites where we broadcast the show, simulcast it every day along with the radio on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. Also, the podcast available on iTunes, Google Play, CastBox, Stitcher, and, of course, Spotify. Also, of course, broadcasting across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, all the way down from Unalaska to Kodiak, the Southern Peninsula, up into the interior. I mean, it's everywhere. We're the largest statewide footprint ever. That's what it's all about here. Anyway, hour 2 of the big radio show today. Normally, we're visited by State Senator Mike Shower for what we lovingly call the Shower Hour of Power. But he is he's out flying planes, and so he wasn't here with us today. And it just so happens that I was finally able to make a connection, not a love connection, but a political connection with the No on One group. And joining us this morning to talk about it, because this has kind of been that stealth ballot measure. I mean, people really, we've been talking about it, but the last couple weeks, it's been very quietly flying under the radar. And this is something that is probably just as important as ballot measure number 2. And that's ballot measure number 1, what they're calling the minimum wage ballot measure. But that's just the sugar that helps the bad medicine go down. Joining us this morning to discuss it is Kati Capozzi, who you may know from the Alaska Chamber of Commerce, but she is with us this morning to talk about it as the leader and the spokesperson for the Protect Our Small Business Vote No on One, a new group that has just come together to try and oppose this ballot measure. And we welcome Kati to the program this morning. Hello, how are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on board and joining us. I mean, Kati, when I first saw this ballot measure, my first thought was that this was a solution looking for a problem. Because I'm like, right? I mean, I've driven by here in the Matsu. I've driven by the fast food joints, now hiring starting at $16 an hour. And I'm like, well, so then what? I mean, if they're already starting at $16 an hour, why do we need a governmental mandate that 15 is the minimum wage? What is that helping? Because the market is already saying fast food workers are making 15, 16 bucks an hour. And so why do we need it? And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that we've got some stealthy things here. So it's the minimum wage is the first component. Then the second part is paid sick leave, which they've been hitting really hard in their messaging that, oh, people get sick. It is, again, remember, these are entry-level jobs, most of what we're talking about here. But the third one is the most troubling, and that is this prohibition on having what they call meetings of a religious or political nature, mandating that an employee show up for one of these meetings. Now, to me, I thought, well, God, I mean, how many businesses have I ever worked at where they said you've got to show up for a religious thing? Then I realized that a political nature could be read as several different things, including if some shop is trying to unionize, there's no way for an employer rather, to gather his employees and say, look, guys, if we do this, it's going to be bad. Under this new law, it basically shuts the employer out of the process. So talk with me a little bit about ballot measure and protect our small businesses, and let's get started with it.
Well, Michael, you just did a phenomenal job of describing what this is, better than I probably would have. So thank you for that. And you're right. You're right. The market has mostly adjusted that the minimum wage piece is almost not really applicable to Alaska. But what I will say is Alaska is one of 7 states that actually is still required to pay the minimum wage for those employees that work in bars and restaurants. Most of the rest of the country has an adjusted wage because they're tipped. Alaska, that does not apply to Alaska. So while you might pass by McDonald's and see that they're paying $17 or $19 or $20 an hour, that is not necessarily true for someone who's working at Sweet Caribou, the salad shop that just opened up in the airport. They are required to pay the minimum wage plus all the tips that go on top of that. So it actually is very concerning for the bars and restaurants in Alaska. And that's why Alaska Char has been hugely vocal on that piece in particular. The Alaska Chamber, frankly, has kind of moved on from that issue as well, because most of our members pay far above minimum wage, and it's kind of a non-issue. So I do want to point that out. And the biggest issue there is that not only is this going to hurt small business owners, they're going to have to figure out a way to afford this. It means that the cost burden will be shifted onto the consumer. So our beers and our burgers and everything else that we enjoy,
right.
The cost will go up. So that's what we need to keep in mind with this minimum wage. We might say, people already pay that, but it will result in Alaskans paying more for the things that they want.
Right. Because again, nobody's just absorbing that cost. And especially when you talk about bars and restaurants, I mean, restaurants have one of the thinnest profit margins and the highest failure rate among small business in the country, period. I mean, it's like 95% fail in the first 5 years. It's not a big, it's not a big money maker. It's usually a labor of love. So if you start tacking on these additional costs with, you were paying an adjusted minimum wage, plus we knew that they were doubling that by getting tips and things like that, then that makes sense. But if all of a sudden you jack it from $10 to $15 an hour, that cost your burger is going to be $25 now, or $30 instead of 18, because that's how it's going to work.
Yeah, and that just goes. I know we talk about these other issues, but it just goes to show that the authors of this and the funders of this are completely tone deaf to Alaska specific issues. The fact that piece wasn't taken into consideration when we're one of 7 states in the country that already is required to pay the minimum wage just is indicative of kind of what we're dealing with. And we can talk about the funders here in a second. The required sick leave, you're right. The yes side is saying, oh my gosh, we don't want to make sick people go to work. That's absolutely true. And I don't know a single employer who wants a sick person to show up to the office. However, the problem mostly with this provision is the overly broad and vague language, how the sick leave can be used. It can be used for mental health days. What's a mental health day? You don't need to have a doctor's note if you take 3 or less days at a time. And how it can be applied, you can use it to care for family members, which is very reasonable. However, as they define family members, it kind of goes through the list, and then the final definition is something along the lines of, or anyone that's a close family relationship. Well, what does that mean? Is that your neighbor Bob? Is it my dog? All of these very vague and very broad. And by the way, you carry over sick leave year over year. And by the way, there are very few exceptions to employers that this applies to. So it's small businesses, it's big businesses, it's seasonal businesses, and they're required, if they hire someone less than 6 months later, which many seasonal businesses do, they're required to carry over that sick leave, maintain what was accrued and then carry it over. So it's a nightmare for these small businesses to have this one more thing to keep track of, but then also just to carry this debt essentially on their balance sheet. So again, another example of how they really didn't think about Alaska's economy when this was authored and thrust upon us. Our small tour operators, that rely on cruise ships and everything else. This is a killer for them.
Right. I mean, because the threshold for the paid sick leave is pretty low, right? I mean, it's businesses that have, I forgot what the number is, but I remember it's low.
Two employees.
Yeah, two
Yes.
employees. So you and your spouse, if you're running a partnership or something like that, and you hire a paid gopher to go do something, oh no, they have to have paid sick leave now.
That's exactly right. Yep,
Right.
that's exactly right. And then the other thing too is, there's a lot of larger businesses out there who say, well, we already pay well, we already provide very generous, paid time off policies. Well, that's good. However, the definitions of who the sick leave applies to, the broad definitions that I just described, you will now also have to follow those exact definitions. So we're not just voting on the amount of leave that gets accrued and how it gets accrued, but the definitions that it can be taken for mental health days, how many days in a row you can take the leave, the carryover. So we're essentially asking people to rewrite their HR policy handbooks. It doesn't matter the size of your business. So that's the other piece. And then, you touched on the free speech aspect. I mean, this is all about no captive audience. That's what this is about. We believe that it's unconstitutional. Employers have the right to do this, and this strips their free speech abilities. It's frankly a difficult issue to explain. It's a very innocuous. When everyone goes to vote, you're going to read a very brief description. It's going to seem reasonable. It's going to seem completely reasonable. But this is one of these things where the devil's in the details. A reminder that we don't have the opportunity to say, hey, this minimum wage piece seems reasonable, but these broad definitions in the sick leave don't. And I'd like to tweak that. This is you vote the whole thing up or you vote the whole thing down. And we think that there's enough horrible things baked into this that we need to vote the whole thing down.
Well, and that was part of the problem. Again, I mean, ballot measure number 2 back in the day when it was voted in, 27 pages of regulations. I stopped. I mean, I'm a wonk, and I stopped at like page 16 and said, okay, I can't even read. I mean, because it referenced back to statutes. And do you think people are actually reading through and figuring out that it's vague language, or are they just going, oh, minimum, that sounds good. It's minimum.
Yeah.
It just raises the minimum wage. I think I mean, this is part of that whole innocuousness, or even in some cases disingenuousness of hiding something in plain sight, hiding the poison inside the sweet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at right now.
And I just want to point out that the people who brought this ballot measure to Alaska, the top funders of the ballot measure are the Fairness Project out of Washington, D.C., the 1630 Fund out of Washington, D.C., and Unite Here out of New York. They are in other states doing this exact same thing, trying to pass a version of this. And I was looking at the Fairness Project website just yesterday, actually, to see what else they're up to. And the very first ballot measure that they are bragging about working on is the Arizona Reproductive Rights ballot measure. And then our ballot measure, the minimum wage and paid sick time, is the one listed right below it. So just to give you an idea, these are not Alaskans who came in and wrote this because we thought we had a problem. You described it perfectly. This is a solution in search of a problem that we don't have. And so, just another instance of outsiders coming to Alaska to try to mandate our business and tell us how to live our lives. And Alaskans don't really have a lot of patience for that. But as you know, awareness is low, and that's not good for us because it does look like a reasonable ballot measure. So you're right. I encourage everyone to read the whole thing. And then think about your pocketbook at the end of the day. We are all struggling from inflation still and the high cost of living. And this is just another cost increase to all of us.
Kati Capozzi is our guest. Protect our small businesses. Vote no on one. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have a little bit more with Kati. I'll probably let her go a little early here. I don't want to take up her whole time. We are long form, but sometimes shorter is better sometimes. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll be back with more of Vote No on One. We'll return right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're in the break right now with Kati Capozzi, talking about ranked choice, or not ranked choice, the minimum wage. There we go, minimum wage. Like I said, Kati, this thing was so slick in the way that they've done this. And of course, the unions have played a big part in this by kind of stealthily. They've got all the printed materials and the signs and everything else. I mean, this would be, to me, this is the big poison pill in this, again, is that meeting bill, because I think they see an opportunity to go in and unionize a bunch of smaller shops or smaller businesses and basically prevent the employer from being able to make a counteroffer or counteract or even argue against why it should happen, or even explain why it could put them out of business. I mean, because you can't have a mandatory meeting with employees that deals with anything political. Doesn't stop the union shops from going in there and proselytizing, but the employer can't say, whoa, wait a second, let me point to my bottom line and show you how that won't work, because that's a mandatory. I mean, I guess unless you made it not mandatory. This is an informational meeting. If you'd like to come, you can. And if you don't want to come, that's fine. But I mean, again, it's so amorphous that could draw a lawsuit at some point.
Oh, without question. I mean, this has been attempted now in a few other states, and there are lawsuits galore. And I can tell you that, if this does pass, I think there's certainly some national organizations that will be interested in litigating on this piece because it's unconstitutional. I mean, it's in our minds, it's black and white that this is unconstitutional.
Right, because a small business owner doesn't get a say in, I mean, you're basically stifling their speech in their exercise of their own business. I mean, that is constant, and whether it's religious or political, those are both constitutionally protected speeches. Now, if you don't want to work for some Yahoo that goes in and goes on some rant about, politician X or politician Y, you can leave. Yeah, you can leave, right? I mean, you can go. And one of the things that I really haven't seen too many arguments about is, what about religious organizations? What about religious organizations that are set up in corporate form, nonprofits and things like that? If they have a meeting as a religious organization with religious undertones, this could destroy some organizations.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, as the chamber, we haven't really dove into that piece as much, but certainly I've heard the concern from many, many people. So yeah. No. And you've dealt with, again, you're dealing with businesses large and small. And I did not realize that the definition changes would have that impact on even some of the larger, because I think a lot of the reaction for people would be, oh, those large businesses, they already do all this, so it doesn't matter. But if it's a complete and total change of the definitions and what it can be used for. We all hear about, I took my cat looked at me funny this morning, and so I took a mental health day because I think my cat needs me. And you're like, what? But that kind of stuff would be covered under this kind, because it's very amorphous. There's really basically whatever you want to take the day for, you could take it for. Just it's marketed as long as it's not 3 days. You don't need a doctor. Actually, you can do 3 days. You just can't do 4.
Just can't do 4. Yeah.
I mean, the ironic thing is you can do 3 days, come back to work for a day, 3 more days, as long as they're not congruent. Then you're clear. So, and it's one of these things where it's a tricky situation because no one wants a sick person to show up to work. No business owner that's a member of mine wants a sick person to show up to work. They're going to take care of their people. It's in their best interest to take care of their people. So, we're kind of doing this dance a little bit. The bigger problem is that this is a mandate on business, and why? It's the solution looking for the problem, and it's inappropriate that we're going to the ballot box with this to ask people to vote on something they don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is, in my mind, this is one of the major problems with government trying to get involved in every aspect of our lives. I mean, we just want to, do what we want to do. We want to make money. We want to help people, serve the public, do what we can do without all this interference. It's just, and basically experimentation, like somehow they know better than us how to run our own businesses. That's the thing that's irritating to most people. Okay. The ding means we're going to return to radio. Okay. Katie, I'll just keep you for the next segment because I know you got other things to do. So, or if you got something more you want to talk about, we can keep you for the full hour. It's up to you. But
I'm happy to stick around if there's questions. Whatever. I'm good.
Okay, here we go. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
The Michael Dukes Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
It's a pinch. I got a big, all right. It's a small amount. It's fine. Let's continue on here. The Michael Duke Show continues. Kati Capozzi is our guest with Protect Our Small Businesses. Vote no on one. Katie's also with the Alaska State Chamber of Commerce, so she's intimately familiar with these issues and the details and what business owners are feeling. Kati, we talked for just a second there about the purveyors of this ballot measure and the people who put it forward. And as you highlighted, these are people who are in other parts of the country. I mean, I hate to say it, but they're meddling in other parts of the country, right? An organization with a lot of political funds, with a political with a political agenda, and then they go into these other states and they try and make these changes. Now, this is what happened with Ballot Measure 2 back in the day when ranked choice voting got instituted. There was actually a commentary in there and some interviews and things like that. And one of the comments was, well, Alaska's a cheap date, right? We've only got 700,000 people. They could throw, a fractional amount of money. At the time, it was $7 million, a fractional amount of money in there and get something in place and then use it and hold it up as an example for other states to follow. And that's exactly what they did with ranked choice voting. And as you said, they're trying this in multiple locations at the same time. This is a push to make something happen nationally by basically using Alaska as a guinea pig and then as a stalking horse for these other states, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the unfortunate part is we know that this will impact small businesses the most. That's why our name is Protect Our Small Businesses. And so small businesses do not have the resources to appropriately fund a ballot measure. Yeah, we might be a cheap date. It still costs a lot of money to spread the word, especially when the language is as innocuous as it is. And these small businesses are just out there trying to keep their doors open, pay their people, put food on the table. A lot of them don't even know that their livelihoods are on the ballot on November 5th. So, we're trying as best as we can. All businesses are not members of the Alaska Chamber, unfortunately. I wish they were. But we're trying to first just inform small businesses that this is out there. I think there's a lot of owners that have no idea.
You will be affected. Yeah, you will be. You have 2 or more employees, you will be affected,
right?
Which is essentially every sole proprietor. Well, I mean, probably most sole proprietorships out there, because usually they're a husband and wife team or whatever. So you will be affected if you ever plan on expanding or growing your business. You have to have it in place.
Yep, that's right. So, this is a David and Goliath situation. We're just put the group together. I do want to kind of highlight the breadth of coalition members so far that have joined, which of course that piece of paper is not in front of me, but off the top of my head, it is the Alaska Char. We talked about them, the Cabaret Hotel Restaurant Association, the Travel Industry Association, ATIA, the Alaska Support Industry Alliance, Associated General Contractors, Associated Builders and Constructors, National Federation of Independent Businesses, the Fairbanks Chamber, the Anchorage Chamber, the Alaska Chamber, of course. I think I'm missing a group, but to give you a sense that, this is concerning for all business.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, as you said, it's a David, it may be cheap date for them because again, all I ever have to do when I see a lot of this advertising, the first thing I look to, if I'm watching it on YouTube or the TV or whatever, or if I'm listening, is I listen for that disclaimer. Top 3 contributors are, and if it's the 1630 fund or the 530 project or the this thing or that thing, and you realize that these are all major organizations with a political axe to grind from outside, and they're coming into Alaska trying to meddle in the politics, and they've got the big, deep coffers. They've got national level coffers when we're talking about local level races. It was just reported this morning that the ballot measure number 2, the repeal, they're being outraised 100 to 1.
Yeah.
100 to 1. And I think for you guys, it's probably even more because you guys haven't even really started to raise money, right? And they're pouring I'm seeing ads all the time, all over the place.
It's the small businesses who are mostly impacted, and they don't have, they have very minor amounts of money to contribute to a ballot measure campaign. They don't even understand what this is and what's happening to them. So yeah, I haven't looked at the APOC reports in a little bit on this, but last I saw they'd brought in a little over $1 million, spent actually a little over $1 million as well, which is interesting considering how quiet it's been. we are sitting at around $50,000 right now. The Alaska Chamber Board of Directors voted just last week to kick in some money to get some bit of word out. But, I will tell you and the listeners, this is an uphill battle. I'm guessing that most people listening think, oh, this is crazy, it's going to get voted down. If the vote were held today, that's absolutely not true.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we need every person who's willing to talk about it, to tell those small business owners about it, to talk to your friends and neighbors. It's going to be that type of an effort if we have any chance of defeating this.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's the thing. This has every chance of passing
Absolutely.
immediately, if not sooner, because again, it's a feel-good movement. You walk into the booth, you've never heard of it because it's kind of the stealth ballot measure that nobody's really talked about, and it says, shall we raise the minimum wage from whatever $10.75 to $15 an hour? And people are like, oh yeah, because again, I'm not making this up, because you can look at what minimum wage ballot measures and initiatives have done around the country. They're almost always voted in.
Yes.
If they're within a reasonable amount, because sure, oh yeah, no, that's a good thing. Everybody should have a living. Everybody should have a, whatever the euphemism is. This has got a good chance of passing, and if it does, the detrimental effects are just astonishing. I mean, especially beyond just the minimum wage component, getting into the paid sick leave, but then that poison pill of the anti-constitutional free speech issue of not being able to hold a meeting with your own employees.
Yep, that's exactly right. The other piece on that minimum wage is, right now under Alaska law, our minimum wage is supposed to be $1 above the federal minimum wage. This will bump us to be $2 above the federal minimum wage. And oh, by the way, it's going to adjust for inflation every single year. So if you think about, what that would have looked like right in the heart of COVID when inflation was 40% or whatever, what would that have looked like? I actually don't know. We haven't run the numbers, but we do know, we had a conference in Fairbanks last week. There was a small business owner. He owns the Banks Ale House. And he talked about how just the $1 increase in minimum wage next year, if it were to pass, would cost his small brewery and burger shop $27,000. So gonna have to figure out how to come up with that money somewhere.
Right.
Like you said, they operate on very thin margins. I think on average, restaurants and bars have less than a 3% margin. So
yeah, it's somewhere between 2.5% and 4% or something like that, which is, again, you start talking about $27,000 in a single year for a single dollar. And that's just the minimum wage component.
Just
that's
the minimum wage. Yep.
Yeah, that's not the, because again, if you've got a small business with say 4 or 5 employees and somebody gets sick, well, everybody had to cover anyway, right? But now
so
if you have to
double your, time and a half and all the other pieces that go in, and
you're already covering it and paying all that, and now you have to pay a sick wage on top of that. Not to mention the fact of the amorphousness of they can just take it for whatever's going on. That is, I mean, it's shattering. I mean, this could be, we're already, the private economy in Alaska is already struggling as opposed to the public economy. This could really put another nail in that coffin for real.
Yeah.
Katie, what do you guys have a website yet? Do you have stuff up that where people can go and take a look at this, so they can point their friends or their neighbors or other business owners towards this?
There is a website that will at least take you to the language. It's votenoon1ak.com. We are just getting it set up, so there's very little there, but you can at least click on the link to read what the ballot measure really is. Please do be informed. Think about all the small businesses that are in Alaska, but also think about your wallets and how this will cost everybody. And the ironic thing about this is the very people that this ballot measure is claiming to help, which is our lowest wage earners, will likely hurt them the most, because these small businesses will be forced to reduce hours, possibly reduce other fringe benefits. And so what this ballot measure is claiming to do, which is just kind of elevating everybody, could very well hurt those entry-level workers right out of the gate, because they'll have less hours to actually have. So
right. Well, we saw that. Look, this again is not theoretical. We saw what happened in Seattle, Seattle proper, when they made their minimum wage $20 an hour, and they're like, "Oh, this will be great for everybody." except for it cut their workforce by like 25 or 30%. It raised the cost of all the goods in that area to where people were paying $15 for a delivered latte in their office. I mean, people were outraged. How could this happen? It was supposed to help everybody. But again, it's arithmetic. They're not just going to eat those costs. Those are going to be costs passed on to you, the consumer. And unfortunately, people are not thinking about that when they're standing in the ballot box going, oh, yes, everybody should have a living wage kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, these policies have been tried in California and Washington State, and they failed. So why try this in Alaska?
Is there here's the big question. Is there a donate link at the website yet? I mean, is there a place where we can, because I mean, hey, I throw $100 into this just because, we've got to do something. I mean, as a small business owner and as an employer, this concerns me greatly.
Yeah. It's coming soon. There's not a donate link yet. The bank account, no kidding, was just set up. So I realize we're behind, but more soon on that. And if someone is very interested, certainly reach out to me, and I will make sure that we can get that donation sent to the campaign account.
We know that small business makes up, and you would know this more than I would as far as numbers, but we know that small businesses, not large, but small mom and pop, we know that they make up a huge component of the economy, right? I mean, 60%. It's 60%. So they're the ones that are going to be directly affected first. I mean, the bigger ones will still be affected. But if we could get 60% of the business owners, each one, to donate $100, which, it's not a lot. It's something. Yeah. Maybe we could fight back against this and get their attention, but they don't, like you said. I didn't really even know what this was about until about 4 or 5 weeks ago. I'm like, ballot measure, what is ballot measure number 1 then, if this is ballot measure number 2? And nobody really knew. And that's when we started talking about it. But if private businesses, small businesses don't know about it because they're busy making a living, then you, the listeners, and you, the public, have to inform them on that. All right, Katie, I give you the final bite at the apple here, last 2 minutes. Again, final plea, final outlay of what it means and where we go from here.
Yeah, just again, this is a situation where you vote the whole thing up or the whole thing down. So there might be pieces of this that seem completely reasonable, but I assure you there's a lot of this is a wolf in sheep's clothing. There are a lot of details in this that are concerning for not only our business owners, but for the entire public. So please do be informed. And vote no on ballot measure 1 November 5th or earlier if you're going to vote earlier.
Yeah, if you're going to vote early, early voting starts in 5 days. The 21st of October, early voting begins. And again, the website, which is still under construction, go crack that whip, Katie. Go crack that whip.
Trust me, it's how I'm spending most of my time for the next 3 weeks.
The website, one more time, is
voteNoOn1AK.com.
voteNoOn1AK.com.
And when you do start seeing some traffic on your social media accounts or ads, please do share them. That this is grassroots all the way.
There's a Facebook page, I'm assuming, as well.
There will be, yes.
There'll be a link on the website to the social media site. Let's put it that way. And Katie, I'm happy to help you guys voice anything or do whatever else you need. I mean, I'm all in on this. As a small business owner, I am super concerned because I thought it was 6 employees, not 2. I thought it was 6. I was like, I thought that's pretty low. No, 2 employees. Yep. That's a problem. That's a real problem. So, all right. Well, Kati Capozzi, protect our small business. Vote no on 1AK.com. Thanks for coming on board and joining us today. Can we check in a couple weeks? Because I think we should hit this.
I'd like to check in every day if I have the option, but whenever you'd like.
Maybe we should do a fundraising update every other day. Okay, Katie, where are we at right now? What do we need? I feel like a Jerry Lewis telethon. All right, here we go. What do we need? We got another $1,000. We need more. All right, Katie, thank you so much for coming on board and being part of it today.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, Kati Capozzi, hold the line for just 1 second. Our guest back with more. The Michael Dukes Show continues. One final segment where I'm going to unpack all this madness. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
your mental suppository. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Yeah, Katie, I mean, I again, just a final bite at the apple for you in case there's something we didn't hit on or we didn't miss. But yeah, I mean, again, even I get surprised like this because I thought it was more employees than that. This is anybody who wants to expand their business beyond their sole, a lot of them are just self-employed, one person, maybe a husband and wife, but anything beyond that, they're opening up a can of worms and making it so much more difficult. This will stifle. I mean, this is the definition of a doom loop, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it limits economic growth. I was speaking with a small business owner yesterday out in Wasilla, and his concern that he expressed to me is by doing, you're elevating everyone to this point, giving the business owner very little opportunity to grow people and add more people to grow, and to offer promotions and raises based off of merit. You've added this cost burden to the pie, and now your ability to kick it up a notch, bring in more people, you've been cut off at the knees essentially.
Right. Well, because how many people are, I've been I had my own business and self-employed, partially self-employed, I guess I should say, for 12 years. But if I had ever considered wanting to hire more employees, that was always the next step, right? If I expand big enough, I can do that. That's already daunting, right? To say, okay, it's not going to be just me, it's going to be somebody else. But now to add this extra layer of complexity and regulation and potential liability on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I personally know business owners who would say, nope, we're just not going to expand that because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it adds to that iffy nature of business to begin with. Now you're creating more unknowns, and people will just say, no, we'll just keep puttering along, or maybe we'll just close up shop if we're not going to do it anymore.
Yep, that's exactly right. My heart goes out to I think about the small tour operators in Southeast Alaska. They've been through hell since COVID hit. Really, this year was really only their second full season back. So they're still very much in recovery mode. They're already operating on thin margins anyway, even with no COVID in the middle of all this. And so when they learn about this, I mean, their eyes just get huge, and they're like, how are we supposed to sustain this? I mean, they're bringing on 16 and 17 and 18-year-olds to, fill in, to be that entry-level worker. You stay open as late as you can into the season, and you just think about these vague definitions and how that will just be impossible for them to, comply with and then keep track of, especially when you're bringing seasonal employees back 5.5 months later, the carryover. I mean, it's unfortunate.
Well, that's the thing, the carryover, and the fact that, look, we've all worked with the current crop of fresh employees, right? And somebody said it earlier that that a lot of times, and this is not everyone, but there's a big slice of them out there that do basically $4 an hour worth of work, and yet they have a $20 an hour attitude like it's owed to them. I mean, it's just kind of a thing. Maybe that's my grumpy old man speaking, but that's been my experience with a lot of these folks. And so now you're going to give them carte blanche to basically call in sick, and then you're like, well, do I keep them or do I fire them? Does that get me in trouble if I fire somebody who's perennially sick, or who just calls in all the time? I mean, you're just creating so much uncertainty. And again, the liability is it's tremendous. And then
all of this, everything that you just described, ends up hurting me and you and the person who wants to go to the store and buy the thing. So, it all results in, you can talk about the poor employer and the employee who's doing $4 an hour worth of work. Just think about the average guy or gal who wants to go. Yep. It costs them.
Yeah, because those that do remain, that decide to take the risk and decide to continue and expand, they're going to make sure that they're protected by increasing their prices to cover the cost of all this.
They have to.
And you, as the consumer, are the ones that are going to pay the bill. And unfortunately, they've been so slick with this. They've done it in such a way that voting yes just seems like a no-brainer. It just seems like a good thing. Oh, we want to help everybody.
Warm and fuzzy. Yeah. I mean, I had the pamphlet open this morning, looking at what everyone's going to actually read. And it's disappointing. I mean, it's just so misleading.
Yeah. I think we need to get better. We as pro-business, pro smaller government, we need to get better at getting ahead of this stuff, because they've snuck a few things under the radar. Ballot Measure 2 a couple of years ago, this one, everything else. I think we need to get better at that. All right, Katie, as always, let's I got you on speed dial here. We'll bring you back here in a week or so, and we'll talk about this again. Thanks for coming on board and joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thanks for coming out. All right, that brings us back to the my God, people, you just the cost of this. Oh man, let's get into it. Here we go. Well, this I was just telling Kati Capozzi that we need to do better. We as business owners, we as people who are in favor of smaller, more limited government need to do better. Now, look, I know we're all busy, right? I know we're all, I can't tell you how busy I am right now. I'm busier than I've been in my entire life over the last 2 months. But even I have to chastise myself for not looking into this ballot measure number 1 earlier. And quite honestly, we should have been looking at this when it was filed and saying, okay, what's this all about? I heard vaguely about a minimum wage thing, but I didn't realize the other components of it. It's a minimum wage thing. Okay, well, does it affect me? Yes, but does it really, But then you look at the other parts of it and you realize that's the least troubling component of this whole proposal is the minimum wage thing. And it does have an impact. Barbara in the chat room says, I think it violates the single subject rule. I would agree. I think if you're looking for a legal toehold on this, that might be it. And I think Katie mentioned also, of course, the constitutional aspect of that. There is a legal toehold there as well to say that employers can't talk to their employees about religion or politics. It may be distasteful if somebody does that, but you can refuse to work there. Right? If you don't want to work for somebody, they're not holding a gun to your head to say you have to work there. So I think that there's a couple legal toeholds. If this thing passes, I fully expect that there will be some legal challenges to it. But I'll be honest with you, and I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here or anything, but I expect that this will probably pass because people just don't know. It sounds so innocuous.
Oh, don't you want everyone to have a living wage? Shouldn't it be? Look at the cost. You were just talking about inflation and how all this healthcare is so much more expensive. And now you should, shouldn't everyone have it? Well, of course, they should all have a living wage. We should do that.
We're talking about unintended consequences, folks. Every action has at least 3 unintended consequences, and at least one of them is always very bad, right? We need to do better at getting ahead of this kind of stuff. Because if I had been paying close enough attention when this hit the books and got signed off on by the lieutenant governor, I would have been on this bandwagon from day one. But that's on me. That's on me for not paying closer. Like I said, I just saw that it was a minimum wage thing, and I'm like, oh, whatever, okay. Not realizing the other components that are attached to it. But see, this is part of an overall kind of overarching plan, and you're seeing this. We saw it when ranked choice voting first went into effect and was first on the ballot in 2020, 4 years ago. That same kind of mentality. You had a group of people, an organization with a political bent that was like, we need to make fundamental changes to America, to the voting system. And so then they shopped it around to where's the best place that we can get a toehold? We need to start thinking strategic instead of tactically. We need to start thinking strategically, because that's what they're doing. They're coming together as organizations, whether it's the 1530 Fund, the 5 Poly thing, the United, whatever. I mean, all these different groups, which you can go through. And if you ever, by the way, if you ever watch these videos or these ads or listen to these ads, just jot down the names of the people who are, or the organizations that are supporting them, and just go Google the organizations. That will usually tell you enough about it, whether or not you want to support the point in question, right? But see, they've come together and they're forming and they're washing all this money through their organizations, and they're saying, we have an issue that we want to fix. We have an issue that we want to put in. And the issue, whether it's changing the electoral system in America through ranked choice voting, whether it is raising the minimum wage, but then also sliding in these other kind of poison pills along the way. And then they just look out across the vastness of the ember ways of grain out there, and they say, okay, where can we plonk this down and make the most impact for the fewest amount of dollars? Or can we do it in several different states at the same time? And then, like she said earlier, like Katie said earlier, then hold them up as an example. What's happened since Alaska approved ranked choice voting? What's happened? The organizations that funded that ballot measure, not Alaskans for Better Elections. Alaskans for Better Elections is just a front. It's just a funnel. It's just the Alaska face of this group of people. They didn't really raise much money in the state of Alaska. The 90+% of that money came from outside, right? Just like the vote no on 2 people have outraised the repeal people 100 to 100 to the repeal people have raised about $100,000. The no on 2 crowd has got $12 million. 12 million. And they're pouring it around like hot grease everywhere, trying to get some traction in it. And what are they talking about? What's the big scam, the latest thing? What is the latest thing? Oh, they're talking about sorry, I was looking for the actual, there was a picture that somebody had shown me. They're talking about open primaries. That's what they're focusing on, not the ranked choice voting component of it. They're focused so hard on the open primaries. And remember, they start off every one of these ads with, a few years ago, we opened the primaries and eliminated dark money. They're back to the dark money thing again. Remember, that's how ranked choice voting got implemented, is because 95% of their advertising was all about the dark money. It wasn't about ranked choice voting. I mean, I saw the ads come across my desk, folks. I saw the ads. I saw the commercials. They had one commercial where some teenager was telling her mom that she wanted chips. And if they don't have these chips, then get this chips. And if they don't have those chips, then get this chips. This is how easy ranked choice voting is, right? That was the ad. But they had 4, 5, 6, 8 different ads that all talked about that one thing.
Dark money.
That's what it was all about. Dark money. Dark money. And so now they're doing the same thing. They open the ads up with it, and now they're talking about dark money and open primaries. They want to ignore the ranked choice voting component of it because they know people are confused and upset about it. But we need to get better about this. And this ballot measure number 1 is so insidious. But again, it goes back to, you can follow the trail back to where it started, again, at these national organizations and we're going to face more of these. I can guarantee you, we are going to face more of these ballot measures and initiatives and challenges in the future, because Alaska is a cheap date. Because we only have a population of 700,000 people, 770, whatever it is, less than 800,000 people and going down. And they could spend a lot more dollars per vote. They could spend a lot fewer dollars per vote to get it passed here than they can in Washington State or Texas or any place else. And then once it passes, they can go to other states and say, well, look, Alaska was reasonable. Why can't you be reasonable? This bill, this measure, has the chance to really damage the private economy even more than it's already wounded here in the state of Alaska. And Kyle just said in the chat room, the minimum wage initiative was filed in July of last year. There's a completely open and public notice process for every initiative. I agree. Kyle, I'm not saying that they snuck it under the radar. I'm saying I am remiss because I was not paying close enough attention to it. We were not paying close enough attention to it. All I heard was that it was a minimum wage law, and I didn't bother to read it. Shame on me. Shame on all of us for not looking at it closer. Just like it's shame on everybody for when ranked choice voting passed, because you got bamboozled about the idea that it was somehow dark money is what they were eliminating. And yet look at what we have this year. $12 million of outside money coming in to tell us how to vote in our own elections in this state for something that only affects the state of Alaska. I mean, if that's not dark money, I don't know what is. I'm not saying that they bypassed the system. I'm saying we weren't paying attention. That's what's going on. And we need to start paying closer attention. And you're like, I'm already at max bandwidth. I know. I feel you. I feel your pain. I too am at max bandwidth. But we need to do better. Maybe what we need to do is bring more people into the circle of trust and have them help us. Maybe we should be crowdsourcing this a little bit better. Maybe we should be trying to work together a little better on this and get those people who are so frustrated, give them a win. If we could defeat something like this, that would be a win. And maybe they'd feel like they got something, that is not quite so hopeless. Oh, man. All right. We got to go. Tomorrow's another day. We will continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Be kind, love one another, live well. Let's do better, folks. Let's do better on this. Wow. Back with more tomorrow. I love how Kyle does it. He hears what I'm not saying like half the time, Kyle. I understand what you're saying, Kyle. I understand. I wasn't trying to impugn the fact that they snuck it in under the, at midnight under the cloak of darkness. I'm saying I wasn't paying attention. I mean, yeah. And anywhere they can try and get this off the ground, they're going to do it. And in places where they can't have initiatives, because as he points out, some states don't have initiatives, they're going to be pouring that money into local races and pouring it into getting some of their chosen legislators to pass that law. We need to do something here. Something needs to change, because otherwise things are about to get real tough around here. All right, we got to go. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.